What's going on, everybody? You know what day it is. It's time for your next dose of Warrior Wednesday with your host, the Wounded Warrior Guy. That's me. And today we're going to be going over part 5 of our 7-part series of what you can expect once the MEB process has concluded and you're ready to transition back into the civilian sector. Before we get into this video, just want to let you guys know I apologize about missing the video last week. I will try to do better about getting these videos out to you guys on time. But without further ado, we're just going to hop right into it. Like I said, today is part 5 of our 7-part series. And today we'll be discussing the pros and cons of buying a home versus renting an apartment. The first thing that you should take into consideration when deciding what type of residential environment you want to set up for yourself after, getting through the MEB process, leaving the Wounded Warrior Barracks, and relocating is going to be, number one, location. We discussed location in part 4, so if you haven't seen that part, make sure to go check it out before you watch this video. But depending on where you live is going to have a lot of influence on what type of living arrangements you want to have. Now, if you're going to be living somewhere that you are very familiar with, near where you grew up, somewhere that you're very comfortable in, and you know that you are going to be able to settle into that environment very well, then I would say, purchasing a home is not a terrible idea. However, if you're looking to relocate somewhere because of job opportunities, income, BAH, educational plans, other factors, somewhere that you've never lived before, you're unfamiliar with, purchasing a home and being stuck into a long-term commitment might not be something that is ideal right then for that situation. And I say that because no matter where you live, if you've never lived there before, you might not know exactly how you're going to feel or how much you're going to enjoy living there until you're actually there for sometimes 12 to 18 months. So it can take a time to acclimate to a new area. So my personal opinion, that should always be the first thing that you ask yourself, is this location somewhere that I know I'm going to enjoy, that I know I'm going to love, that I know I can live there for 15 to 30 years? If that answer is yes, absolutely, look into homes. If it's no, maybe not, consider renting an apartment, because you can rent an apartment, do a 15-month lease, you can back out of the lease, and all it does is it costs you a fine, whereas a home, that is a long-term commitment, and it's much more difficult to back out of that, buy a, find a buyer to take on that loan, and it gets a lot more complicated. So, my opinion, that should be the first thing that you ask yourself. Next thing that you ask yourself is, am I ready to purchase a home? And there's a few things that you have to take into consideration when determining if you are financially ready to purchase a home. The 3 things that I want to go over is going to be your debt to income ratio, your credit score, and your reserves or savings. Debt to income ratio, that is going to be your adjusted income versus, so it's going to be the difference between your gross income and your adjusted income, okay? Now, your gross income is the total amount of income that your family receives steadily every single month. So you take that number, then what you do is you determine how much debt or how much automatic payments have to go out every month. And the best way to determine how much debt will be taken into consideration when attempting to purchase a home is to look at how many payments are left on whatever it is that you're paying off. Now, if you have something that you're paying on that has indefinite payments, so like your water, electricity, If you pay internet services, things of that nature, those are ongoing payments, right? So those are always going to be taken into consideration, and that is automatically going to be added to your debt value. But a lot of things that people don't take into consideration are like their phone plans, their vehicle payments, and things like that. If you're paying off a vehicle, you've had a vehicle for 5 years, but you have 12 more months left before that vehicle is totally paid off, you still have to take into consideration that that vehicle is a part of your debt. And lenders will typically, the rule of thumb is that they typically include anything that has more than 10 payments remaining. So anything that you're paying towards every single month that has 10 or more payments is going to be included in your debt amount. Then you take your gross income, you subtract your debt amount, and you determine how much of a percentage that debt is compared to your gross income. That is how you get your debt to income ratio. Now, most lenders will give you a percentage. So you have percentages for everything. They want a specific percentage for your debt to income ratio, which is typically 30% or less, meaning that the money leaving every month needs to be 30% or less of that gross income that your family receives every month. Then they will also have a percentage, and this is the one that typically varies the most, of how much you're willing to get in your loan in relation to what your adjusted income is. So in order to get your adjusted income, you take that gross income, which is everything. You subtract all your bills. What's left is what's known as the adjusted income. And lenders want that remaining percentage to be a certain number. And it does vary. It's typically between 20 and 25% is what they want to see that you have remaining. Now, I know that that doesn't make sense because you want your debt to income ratio to be less than 30%, and you need to have at least 20%, 25%, whatever. But your debt to income ratio, basically, the lower it is, the more you'll get approved for, and the lower the APR will be that you'll get approved for to lock in that loan. So that's debt to income ratio and kind of how to determine how to and to determine what your debt to income ratio is, and also to determine what your adjusted income is. So you can kind of see how much money you have to play with when determining whether or not you're financially able to purchase a home. Because just because your family receives $10,000 a month does not mean that you have $10,000 a month to spend towards other things, because you have to subtract all of those other financial commitments, those other bills, before you know how much money you're working with. Next, we'll talk about your credit score. Typically, I would say that your credit score needs to be somewhere in the range of 700. I'll say 690 and up is okay. 700 and up is better. The higher your credit score, the more money you're going to get approved for, the lower your APR percentage is going to be. And just remember that whenever it comes to your credit score, the credit score is taken from 3 separate credit scores that you get. So you get a credit score from FICO, TransUnion, and Equifax. You need to know what all 3 of those scores are. Basically, what you do is you take those 3 scores, you add them up, you divide by 3 to get the average score. That is the closest representation of what your actual credit score is. And what I will say is that like I said, you need to have about that 700 plus before you really start deciding whether or not you want to purchase a home, because that range is going to allow you to get the best amount, the highest amount of a home loan for the lowest APR percentage. Last thing that we're going to discuss whenever deciding to purchase a home is going to be your reserves or your savings. The more savings that you have, which is looked at as reserve funds, the better, the more money you're going to get approved for. Because if a lender is looking at you and they see that you have a ton of savings put back, they are going to be more willing to offer you a higher amount of money for that in that loan, because they know that you have the reserves to pay a large portion of it back. So the likelihood of you missing payments is low, because even if something happens and you don't get paid 1 week, you have those reserves to tap into to pay money. And if you just stop paying altogether, they know that they can come in and they can take that money from you because you have it there. You have something to lose, and you have reserves that allow you to continually pay off those payments. So you're looked at as being a more dependable loan recipient, because they know that you are more likely to continue to pay those payments. Yeah, so those are the three main things that you need to be looking at before you can fully decide if you want to purchase a home. That's your debt to income ratio. You want it to be 30% or less from your overall income or your gross income. Your credit score, which needs to be at about 700 plus to make sure that you can get approved for a good amount of money in your home loan at a low APR. And then your reserves. The more reserves that you have, the higher the likelihood is that you're going to get approved for a loan at the amount that you desire, because those lenders see you as being a dependable client. Now, we're going to look into the benefits of renting out an apartment. And like I said initially, the number one benefit is if you're going to be living at a location that you're not familiar with, you are not sure if that location is going to meet all your needs, and you can't say for certain that you're willing to live there for 30 years. And if that's the case, you should not be buying a home. You should rent out an apartment because you have more flexibility, and if you don't like the place, you back out of the lease, you pay the fine, and you move on. You try another location. The next thing that I will say is that renting an apartment is great if preparations are needed, because any of the other previous things we've discussed are not where they should be. So, if your debt to income ratio, if you make $5,000 a month, but you owe $4,500 a month in bills, your debt to income ratio is way too high, meaning that your debt is the percentage of debt that you have in relationship to your total income is too high for you to be able to take on a long-term commitment like a mortgage. Therefore, renting out an apartment would give you the added time to, work on that. Now, obviously, if you make $5,000 a month and your bills are $4,500, I don't think that you could afford to rent an apartment. That was just an example. I'm just saying that if you want time to be able to work on your debt to income ratio to pay off some of those bills, some loans, get your car paid off, all of those things, to get that percentage down to where you need it be, renting an apartment is a great way to give you time to work on that. If your credit score is extremely low and there's lots of room for improvement, renting an apartment can give you time to work on that. Additionally, renting an apartment, having your apartment rent, your electrical, your water, your trash valet services, all these other things, having all those bills when you get internet, paying that bill. Once you get an apartment and you get all these bills, and you have that apartment for, say, 2 years while you're working on other things, paying those bills on time will continue to raise your credit score. Additionally, while you're doing those things, you can do other things to raise your credit score. So like if you have some past due bills, if you have a credit card that was maxed out when you was young because you did something stupid, save up the money, pay that off, get it pulled from your credit report. Continue to pay the bills, continue to pay your month, continue to work on your credit score. Over time, you'll see that number go up. Once it gets about that 700 plus number, that's whenever you can start considering to buy a home. Last thing we're going to talk about is your reserves. I know what you guys are thinking, Austin, you're telling us that we should rent out an apartment, which is money. You're telling us that we got to pay off our debt, which is money. Now you're telling us we got to save money? Well, I'm going to say that you don't have to, okay? I'm just saying, depending on your situation, your family dynamics, you might have to. If you're a single individual getting out of the MEB process and everything else is looking great, your debt to income ratio is low, your credit score is good, there's no reason why you can't buy a home, because chances are you're looking for a smaller home on a smaller plot of land because it's just you. Therefore, you can use your VA home loan, you can purchase a home, you'll know that you'll get approved for probably what you're looking for at an APR rate that is a good rate. Therefore, you can move forward. You're married with 6 kids looking for a, 5-bedroom, 4-bath, 2,800 square feet on a half of an acre in Florida. Chances are you're going to need reserves because you need to be approved for a large amount of money in order to afford that extremely expensive home. And a good way to up that approval amount is by working on your reserves, working on your savings. So if you're in that situation and your savings is depleted, but your credit score is good, and your debt to income ratio is good, you could consider renting an apartment, using that time to put money away to continually work on your savings to increase those reserves, which in turn will result in a higher approval amount at a lower rate, because those reserves show that you would be a dependable client because you have the money set aside to make those payments, make them on time, so you're just looked at as more dependable. Well, guys, that's all I got for you today. That is my video on purchasing a home versus renting out an apartment. And just remember, for the home, you want to make sure, number one, that you're going to be comfortable in the location and that long-term commitment is something that you're willing to take on, because you can safely say that you are willing to stay at that location for an extended period of time. Number two, that you have met all the criteria, the basic criteria that has financially set you up to be able to afford a home. So your DTI, your debt to income ratio, is at the percentage 30% or below, which will allow you to have that adjusted income that is capable of handling a mortgage. Your credit score is 700 plus, which will increase the amount of loan that you will be approved for, decrease the APR percentage that will come locked into that loan. Because when you're thinking about a mortgage, not a lot of people consider a difference between 2% and 3% a big difference. But whenever you're talking about a loan that's 400 plus thousands of dollars, that 1% over time is a huge difference. Lastly, make sure to work on your reserves. Make sure that your savings are not depleted. Continue to put back, because once again, that will raise your chances of being approved for the loan amount that you desire at the APR that works for your budget. For the apartments, if for some reason you are not confident in the location and you are unfamiliar with the surrounding areas, renting an apartment will allow you to go down, will allow you to view neighborhoods, get used to the market, check out school districts if you have kids, and to really determine if that's somewhere that you can see yourself living for 30 plus years. Additionally, if any of the things that we talked about for purchasing a home is not where it should be, renting an apartment could give you the time that you need to work on those things, to get prepared so that you can successfully purchase a home in a comfortable manner. It's not going to be stressful. It's not going to be rushed. It'll be done right. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like always, even if you don't realize it, even if you don't believe it, there's a warrior in every single one of you. And I see it. Take care.